Mother arrives home late, finds her 9-year-old son covered in bruises, and takes him to the emergency room. When the boy tells the doctor what happened, he immediately calls 911. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night when Megan Wallace finally turned the key to her apartment. The hallway light flickered above her as she pushed open the door, juggling her handbag, a stack of patient charts, and the plastic container of leftovers from the hospital cafeteria. Her feet ached from the 12-hour shift at St. Andrew's Medical Center, and her mind raced through the list of tasks waiting at home: laundry, emails, and hopefully, if she was lucky, a full night's sleep. But as she stepped inside, a wave of unease stopped her cold. The living room was unusually quiet. No sound from the television, no hum of bedtime chatter. Just the soft tick of the wall clock and the rustle of wind brushing the balcony door. Megan set her things down carefully and called out, "Sarah?" A beat of silence. Then, from the hallway, the babysitter appeared. Sarah looked startled, holding her phone in both hands, clearly not expecting Megan this early, though this was already later than usual. "Oh. Hey, I thought you'd be back even later tonight. Liam's already in bed." Megan glanced toward the hallway. "Is he asleep?" Sarah nodded quickly. "Yeah. He was a little tired after the park today." That small detail made Megan pause. "The park?" "Yeah, we went after dinner. Just for a bit. He was running around a lot." Something in her tone felt off, too casual, too rehearsed. Megan walked past her, heading toward Liam's room. As she pushed the door open, the dim glow of a nightlight revealed her 9-year-old son curled up under the covers, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Hey, baby," she whispered, sitting gently on the edge of his bed. Liam stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mama? I'm here, sweetheart. Just wanted to check on you." As he sat up slightly, the blanket slid down, revealing his arms, and Megan's breath caught. There were bruises. Not just one, not the kind you get from a stumble or bumping into furniture. His left forearm was covered in dark purplish splotches, and there was a fresh-looking scrape on his elbow. Lower down, near his knee, another bruise peeked out from under his pajama shorts. Her voice softened, but tightened. "Liam, what happened to your arm?" He looked down, then quickly pulled the blanket back up. "I fell. At the park." Megan turned to him fully now. "That looks like more than just a fall." "I was climbing, and slipped," he added, eyes avoiding hers. Behind her, Sarah appeared in the doorway. It was one of those jungle gym things. He was playing fine, then lost his footing. "I helped him up right after." But Megan wasn't listening anymore. Her focus remained on Liam's face, on the way his fingers twisted the edge of the blanket, on the flash of something, maybe fear, maybe discomfort, passing through his eyes. "I think I'm going to take him to get checked out," she said, rising. "Just to be safe." Sarah blinked. "Now? It's really late." "I'm a nurse," Megan said flatly. "I've seen bruises from falls. These don't look right." Sarah hesitated, then shrugged. "Okay. Do you want me to come?" "No. I'll handle it." She didn't wait for more discussion. 15 minutes later, Megan was buckling Liam into the back seat of her car, the cool night air brushing against their skin as they drove toward the hospital. The streets were mostly empty, and the stillness of the drive made her mind race even faster. At the emergency room entrance, she scooped Liam up despite his protests and carried him inside. Familiar fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they were checked in and guided to a small examination room. Megan had swapped her role as nurse for that of mother, but the professional instincts remained sharp beneath her anxiety. A middle-aged pediatrician named Dr. Harlan entered shortly after, greeting them with a calm, practiced demeanor. "Let's take a look," he said gently, turning to Liam. "Can you tell me what happened, buddy?" Liam looked at Megan, then at the doctor. His voice was barely a whisper. "I fell. From a big, wooden thing at the park." The doctor lifted Liam's arm carefully, examining the bruises and the scrape. Did you hit anything else? Did someone see you fall? Liam didn't answer immediately. He glanced again at Megan, his lip trembling. Dr. Harlan sat back in his chair. I'm going to run a quick check, just to be thorough. Megan stepped aside, watching carefully as the examination continued. But her thoughts were spinning. Her instincts were ringing with a quiet alarm she couldn't quite silence. The bruises seemed scattered, inconsistent with a single fall. The scrape on his elbow was oddly angled. And more than anything else, her son seemed guarded. Not just scared from a tumble, but uncertain. Hesitant. As the doctor finished, he stood and faced her with a reassuring nod. I'll file the report and have someone from our social services team come talk to you both. It's standard in cases like this. Megan nodded slowly. She knew the protocol. But knowing it from the inside didn't make it any less unsettling when you were on the receiving end. Outside, in the waiting area, she sat beside Liam as he leaned into her side. His breathing had calmed, but she could still feel the weight in his silence. She stroked his hair gently, whispering, "It's okay. You can tell me anything, sweetheart." He nodded against her shoulder but didn't speak. For the first time in a long while, Megan realized she didn't know what had really happened to her son that day. And that terrified her more than anything. The hallway outside the examination room smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee gone cold. Megan sat upright on a plastic chair, arms folded tightly across her chest as she waited. Liam was in the pediatric wing, finishing up some follow-up tests ordered by Dr. Harlan. The nurse had assured her it was routine, just some imaging and vitals, but Megan couldn't shake the unease pressing against her ribs. It wasn't just the bruises. It wasn't even the story Liam had offered. It was everything around it, his reluctance to speak, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes, and the sense that something important had been left unsaid. A woman approached, late 30s, blazer over a casual blouse, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Mrs. Wallace?" she asked softly. Megan stood, extending her hand. "Yes. I'm Dana Wexler. I'm with Child and Family Support Services here at the hospital. Dr. Harlan asked me to have a quick chat with you and Liam. Just part of our usual process in cases where the cause of injury isn't fully clear." Megan nodded. "Of course. I'd like to speak to Liam first, just for a few minutes, privately. Is that all right?" Her instinct flared protectively, but she reminded herself this was protocol. She had done it herself, in other contexts. Still, the idea of not being in the room with Liam while he answered questions made her stomach knot. "Okay," she said slowly. "But I want to be nearby." Dana offered a kind smile. "Absolutely. We have a child-friendly room just around the corner. You can wait outside, it won't be long." Megan walked with her toward the room, then watched as Liam was brought in by a nurse. He looked tired, but gave her a little wave before disappearing behind the soft-colored door. It closed with a quiet click. The hallway was still. Megan leaned against the wall and exhaled deeply. Inside, the conversation began slowly. Dana sat across from Liam, keeping her voice light and her tone neutral. "So, your name is Liam, right? That's a strong name." He nodded once. "I know hospitals can feel kind of scary. But you're doing really well. I just want to talk for a minute, not about anything hard. Just to get to know you and understand what happened today." Liam kept his eyes on the carpet, then murmured, "Okay. You told Dr. Harlan that you were at the park?" He nodded again, more slowly. "Were you with someone?" He paused, then answered, "Sarah." "Sarah's your babysitter?" "Yes." "What were you doing at the park?" "Climbing the wooden house thing. I fell." "Can you tell me more about that?" Liam's hands fidgeted in his lap. He picked at a thread on the hem of his sleeve. "I was climbing, and I slipped. That's it." "Were there other kids around? Anyone else see?" "No. It was getting dark." Dana made a small note, careful not to let the pen noise distract him. Where was Sarah when that happened? Liam hesitated. On her phone. Sitting on the bench. Did she come help you after? He nodded. She asked if I was okay. Dana let a moment of silence settle before she gently added, "Do you feel safe with Sarah?" Liam looked up quickly, not at her, but toward the door, as if checking whether Megan might somehow hear. "I guess," he said. "Do you ever feel nervous when she's watching you?" He didn't answer. Outside, Megan checked her phone for the 5th time. She had a dozen unread emails, a message from the hospital administrator asking about a shift trade, and a photo from her sister of her new puppy. None of it registered. When Dana finally reappeared, Megan stood immediately. "How did it go?" "Liam did fine," Dana said. "He was quiet, but cooperative." Megan's eyes searched the woman's expression. "Did he say anything I should know?" Dana hesitated for a beat, just long enough to signal caution. "He didn't share anything that directly contradicts what's already been said. But he did seem uncertain. Guarded. I'm not saying there's evidence of anything serious, but in our line of work, uncertainty sometimes says more than words." Megan's jaw tightened. "So, what happens now?" "We'll file a preliminary observation. That doesn't mean there's an investigation, just that this incident is noted, and if anything further arises, it becomes part of the record. We recommend you monitor his behavior, and maybe consider evaluating his care environment." Megan exhaled slowly. "You mean Sarah?" Dana didn't confirm or deny. "If you ever have concerns, even subtle ones, we encourage you to trust your instincts." Liam came out a moment later, quieter than before. Megan gave him a long, reassuring hug before they left the hospital, stepping into the cool night air that had turned sharper while they were inside. The drive home was silent at first. Liam stared out the window, his reflection soft in the glass. Megan broke the quiet. "Hey, buddy. I want you to know something." He didn't turn his head, but she could tell he was listening. "You can tell me anything. If something's bothering you, even if it feels small or weird or scary, I'll listen. And I'll believe you." There was a long pause. "I know," he said softly. Back home, Megan helped him get into bed again. She checked the bruise on his arm, now tinged with yellow at the edges, then kissed his forehead. Down the hall, Sarah was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, watching some late-night game show. She muted the television as Megan walked in. "Everything okay?" Megan didn't answer immediately. She stood in the doorway, arms folded. "The hospital filed a protocol notice," she said. "Standard," they said. "Because of the bruising." Sarah blinked. "Wait, like a report?" "It's not an accusation. But they did speak to Liam. Separately." Sarah sat up straighter. "And?" "He said he fell. That you were on your phone." "I was right there," Sarah insisted. "It was just a second." Megan watched her carefully. "They're not pursuing anything now. But they told me to pay attention." There was a long silence. "I care about Liam," Sarah said, her voice harder now. "You know I do. I need to know that when I'm not home, he's completely safe. Not just watched, really seen. Not left alone climbing structures after dark." Sarah opened her mouth, then shut it again. Megan turned toward the hallway. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow." That night, long after the apartment had gone quiet, Megan lay awake staring at the ceiling. The shape of the conversation with Dana stayed with her. Not for what was said, but for what had been carefully left out. There was no proof of anything beyond negligence. No sign of abuse or cruelty. But sometimes, carelessness was enough. Sometimes, a child's silence meant more than a dozen words. And Megan had learned to trust silence. It had a language of its own. The following morning, the apartment was quiet in a different way. Not the calm of a Sunday lie-in or a lazy weekend morning, but a measured silence that wrapped itself around everything like fog. Megan moved through the kitchen with care, preparing breakfast with mechanical precision: toast with jam, scrambled eggs, a few slices of apple arranged neatly on Liam's plate. It wasn't much, but it was consistent, one small thing she could still control. Liam came out of his room wearing his usual soft cotton t-shirt and navy sweatpants, dragging his dinosaur by one arm. His eyes were heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from something quieter, a dull kind of weariness Megan had only recently begun to recognize. "Morning, baby," she said gently, setting the plate in front of him. He murmured a greeting without looking up, climbing into the chair and beginning to eat without a word. Megan sat across from him, watching his small fingers fumble with the fork. She didn't press him. Not yet. But her mind was already ticking through options: how to approach the next conversation with Sarah, whether to speak to someone at school, who she might trust outside the hospital for a neutral opinion. After breakfast, Liam disappeared into his room again. Megan took the opportunity to make a call she'd been avoiding for hours. She stepped onto the balcony, closing the sliding glass door behind her to muffle the sound. "Hey," said the voice on the other end. "Didn't expect to hear from you this early. Claire, I need to ask you something." Megan's voice was low but steady. "It's about Sarah." There was a pause. "Okay, what about her? You recommended her. You said she watched your niece for a few months, right?" "Yes. Back in spring." "Why? Did anything ever seem off? Anything that made you hesitate before telling me about her?" Claire sighed, and Megan could almost picture her pressing a hand to her forehead. "She wasn't terrible," she said slowly. "Just a little checked out sometimes. I remember my sister saying she didn't always pay close attention. But there was never anything serious, Meg. Nothing that made us think she was dangerous." Megan closed her eyes. "But not attentive?" "No. And sometimes she left the TV on and didn't realize the kid had wandered into another room. Stuff like that. That was enough." Megan thanked her and ended the call. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she stepped back inside. Sarah arrived shortly after 11, as scheduled. She walked in with the casual confidence of someone who wasn't expecting confrontation. Megan, waiting in the living room, asked Liam to go read in his room for a little while. Once he was gone, she gestured for Sarah to sit. She didn't. "We need to talk," Megan said. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I figured. I spoke to someone. A friend whose niece you used to watch." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her jaw tightened slightly. "She said you were careless. Not malicious, but distracted. And after what happened at the park, and the hospital visit, and everything Liam didn't say, I don't feel confident in your supervision anymore." Sarah crossed her arms. "So what are you saying? That I'm fired?" "I'm saying this arrangement isn't working. Liam needs someone more engaged. More present." "I was present. You were sitting on a bench on your phone." "That's not illegal," Sarah snapped. "No. But it's not acceptable either," Megan replied calmly. "Not for my child." There was a long silence between them. Finally, Sarah nodded stiffly. "Fine. I'll get my stuff." She left without another word. Megan watched the door close behind her and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. There was no satisfaction in the exchange, no sense of triumph, only a cold vacancy left behind by the uncertainty still clinging to Liam's behavior. Later that afternoon, Megan made a decision. She sent a message to a colleague from the pediatric wing, someone she trusted implicitly, Dr. Renata Bowers, a developmental psychologist who occasionally consulted on difficult cases. Within the hour, Renata responded with a warm but concerned voice message. "Bring him in," she said. "No pressure, no tests unless he's comfortable. Let's just talk." The next day, Megan and Liam sat in a softly lit office filled with books, plush chairs, and framed posters of forests and oceans. Renata welcomed them with her usual blend of warmth and clinical calm. She spoke directly to Liam first, asking about his favorite games, what he liked to do after school, and whether he'd ever seen a stingray up close. Gradually, the stiffness in his posture began to melt. Megan stepped outside to give them space. Through the closed door, she couldn't hear anything, but she watched the clock. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. When Renata finally stepped out, her expression was unreadable. "He's guarded," she said softly. But not in a way that screams trauma. It feels more like confusion. Like he doesn't quite know how to process something. Megan nodded. "That tracks." I asked him open-ended questions. He didn't give much. But what he did say, I found interesting. He mentioned rules. Said sometimes the rules at home were different when you weren't there. Megan blinked. "Rules?" "Yes." He said Sarah would sometimes tell him not to tell you certain things. That's not uncommon with inattentive or lazy caregivers. They tell kids to keep secrets so they don't get in trouble. But for a 9-year-old, it creates tension. Uncertainty about what's right. Megan's voice caught in her throat. "So he's not hurt?" "Not physically. Not recently, anyway. But he's been carrying something. A fear of getting someone in trouble. Or of making things worse." Megan pressed a hand to her face, exhaling slowly. "He's been different. I thought maybe I was imagining it." "You weren't." Renata offered a small, sad smile. "You did the right thing bringing him here. Let's not overwhelm him. Give it time. And keep the routine stable, lots of predictability, lots of room for him to talk when he's ready." Megan nodded again, slower this time. That night, back at home, she sat with Liam in his room as he built a structure from magnetic tiles on the floor. She watched his fingers move, calm now, focused, and let the silence stretch. Eventually, she asked, "When Sarah was here, did she ever ask you to hide things from me?" Liam's hand stopped moving. Then he nodded. "Sometimes." "What kind of things?" "Like if we stayed at the park too long. Or if I told her I was hungry and she didn't make anything." Megan's chest tightened. "Why do you think she didn't want me to know?" He looked up at her. "She said you'd be mad. And then she'd lose her job." Megan reached out and touched his arm gently. "I'm never going to be mad at you for telling the truth, okay? Even if it's hard." He nodded, slower this time. "I didn't want anyone to be in trouble." "I know," she said, her voice soft. "But it's my job to keep you safe. And I can only do that if I know what's happening." Liam leaned against her quietly. Outside, the city lights flickered through the curtains, and somewhere beyond them, life continued with its usual rush and noise. But inside that room, Megan felt something shift, not dramatically, not with closure, but like a door creaking open, slowly enough to let the light in. 2 days had passed since Liam's quiet admission, and though Megan tried to maintain a sense of normalcy at home, the undercurrent of tension remained. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. What disturbed Megan now wasn't a single event or conversation, but the way her own awareness had shifted. She had spent months trusting routines, assuming the presence of a caregiver meant safety, and now that illusion had cracked. Everything from the past few weeks seemed newly significant: glances she'd overlooked, silences she'd ignored, fatigue she'd rationalized. She stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing out Liam's lunchbox, her hands moving on autopilot. On the counter beside her, the form from the hospital's Child and Family Services remained unopened. It wasn't a report, just a summary of protocol, recommendations for monitoring, and a number to call if concerns escalated. But even the presence of the document in her home made her stomach twist. That evening, Megan sat at her laptop in the dining room after Liam had gone to bed. She opened her hospital portal and declined 2 additional shifts offered for the following week. Her manager would notice, and questions would follow, but for now, Liam came first. The next morning, she walked him to school for the first time in weeks. Liam clutched her hand as they neared the building. The school was modest but well kept, with colorful murals on the outer walls and rows of neatly parked bicycles out front. Students streamed in around them, backpacks bouncing, voices loud and carefree. Megan glanced down at her son, watching his face closely as they approached the entrance. He hesitated. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Liam gave a small nod, but didn't let go of her hand right away. When they finally reached the classroom door, he looked up at her. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Will you pick me up today?" Megan crouched so they were eye level. "Yes," she said. "I'll be right here when school ends." He nodded again and stepped inside. Back home, Megan opened her notebook and began listing names, people she could trust, acquaintances who might know someone reliable, colleagues who had spoken positively about their childcare providers. She didn't want another Sarah. What she needed now was someone who would treat Liam not just as a task or responsibility, but as a child, a person who mattered. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Alina. "Just heard about Sarah. If you need anything, let me know. Also, check your email. Sent you something." Megan opened her inbox. Alina had forwarded the contact information of someone named Emily Rivera, a part-time caregiver who lived in the next neighborhood over. The message included a short description: former elementary teacher, now working privately with 2 families, background in child development. Megan read the email 3 times. The professionalism, the references, the tone, everything felt right. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but worth pursuing. She called Emily that afternoon. The woman's voice was calm and clear, with a rhythm that felt practiced but not rehearsed. They arranged an initial meeting for the following day. That night, as Megan tucked Liam into bed, she told him gently, "Tomorrow someone new is coming to meet us. Her name is Emily. I think you might like her." Liam looked at her, uncertain. "She's not like Sarah?" he asked. "No," Megan replied. "I've spoken with her already. She's worked with a lot of kids, and I'll be here when you meet. We'll decide together, okay?" Liam nodded and pulled the blanket up to his chin. The next afternoon, Megan cleaned the living room more thoroughly than usual, not out of formality, but nervous energy. When Emily arrived, she wore jeans, a loose linen blouse, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a low bun, and she carried a canvas tote bag filled with what looked like books, puzzles, and something that resembled an art set. "Megan?" she asked, extending her hand. "It's good to meet you." Megan shook it, already noting how direct her eye contact was, how composed her demeanor seemed. "I'm glad you could come," Megan said. "Liam's in his room, I'll bring him in." But before Megan could turn, Emily gently said, "If he's shy, it's okay. I can wait a bit. I brought a few things, maybe he'll want to see." She knelt near the coffee table and started setting out a small wooden puzzle and a picture book about sea creatures. Within minutes, Liam peeked around the corner. Emily looked up and smiled. "Hi, Liam. I heard you like dinosaurs and outer space. I brought a book with jellyfish that glow in the dark. It's not a T-Rex, but it's still kind of cool." Liam didn't answer, but stepped into the room slowly. Megan watched from a distance as Emily continued. She didn't rush him. Didn't push conversation. She simply opened the book, spread it on the rug, and began flipping pages, pointing out interesting facts in a low, thoughtful voice. 10 minutes later, Liam was sitting beside her, pointing at a glowing blue illustration of a deep-sea squid. Megan sat down on the couch, quietly observing. After about an hour, Emily stood and turned to Megan. "Would you like to talk alone for a few minutes?" They stepped into the kitchen while Liam remained focused on the puzzle. Emily spoke first. "He's a little guarded, but very bright. He listens carefully. I can tell he's used to noticing small things, probably from having to navigate adult behavior that didn't always make sense." Megan swallowed, her throat tight. "I'd be happy to work with you both," Emily continued. "A few hours a day to start. I send daily updates and keep notes on any behavior shifts I observe. I believe in full transparency, and I don't mind questions. In fact, I encourage them. Megan felt something soften inside her. Relief. Not full trust, not yet, but something close. "I think that sounds good," she said. "Let's give it a try." They agreed to a 2-week trial. Emily would come every weekday afternoon, staying until Megan returned from work. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a first step. That evening, Megan sat down at her laptop and adjusted her work schedule again. She declined another shift, then applied for partial flexibility under the hospital's family policy. The next few days brought subtle but important changes. Liam began smiling more. He described his afternoons with Emily in short but enthusiastic bursts, how they painted with watercolors, how they created a spaceship out of cardboard, how they read about volcanic eruptions. He didn't speak about Sarah. Not even once. Still, Megan remained vigilant. She read every report Emily sent. She checked in daily. She watched Liam's expressions closely, looking for anything that might hint at discomfort or fear. But slowly, her posture began to loosen. Her eyes softened. She no longer jumped at every long pause or awkward silence. One afternoon, Emily stayed a few minutes later to speak with Megan. "He's beginning to trust again," she said. "That's not something I take lightly." Megan nodded. "Thank you." Emily smiled. "You're doing more than you think." As she left, Megan looked toward Liam, who was drawing quietly on the living room rug. He looked up and grinned. "Mama, look. It's a meteor crashing into a mountain." Megan crouched beside him, admiring the thick, bold lines of red and orange streaking across the paper. "It's beautiful," she said. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't pretending to sound calm. She truly meant it. By the end of the second week with Emily, Megan found herself walking through her own apartment with a new kind of awareness, not anxious or panicked, but sharply observant. She had always prided herself on being attentive, both in her work and at home, but the last few weeks had altered her perception. She now questioned things she used to overlook, the way routines settled too easily into autopilot, how quickly she'd come to rely on people based on recommendations alone, how small changes in Liam's behavior had gone unnoticed until they no longer could be ignored. Each day after work, Megan returned to find Liam fully immersed in some creative activity with Emily, making papier-mâché planets, building mazes from shoeboxes, or learning about thunderstorms through an interactive weather app. The energy in the apartment had shifted. Liam's eyes were brighter, his movements more expressive. But something about the world outside their home was starting to feel off. It began with small things. On Wednesday, while picking Liam up from school, Megan noticed a man in a silver sedan parked across the street. He wasn't doing anything overtly suspicious, just sitting there with the engine running, but Megan couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching. The next day, the same car was there again, this time parked a block away. She didn't mention it to Liam, but her fingers tightened around the steering wheel on the drive home. That Friday, as she walked Liam up the steps to school, he hesitated near the front entrance. "Do I have to go in?" he asked. Megan crouched beside him. "Why? Did something happen?" He shrugged, looking down at the ground. "It's just loud. And sometimes no one wants to play." "Is it always like that?" she asked gently. "No. Just sometimes. And Mrs. Caro says I'm quiet. She keeps asking if I'm okay. Do you feel okay at school?" He shrugged again. Megan kissed the top of his head. "If there's anything that doesn't feel right, even if it's small, you can tell me. Always." He nodded and walked inside without another word. Back in her car, Megan sat for a moment before pulling away. The street seemed ordinary. Kids ran across crosswalks. A crossing guard waved at a distracted parent. Yet that same silver sedan appeared again, parked half a block down. She couldn't see the driver clearly this time. Part of her told herself it was nothing, that cities were full of coincidences, and anyone could be parked near a school for any number of reasons. But something deeper urged her to act. That evening, Megan brought it up with Emily after Liam had gone to bed. They sat in the kitchen, 2 mugs of lukewarm tea between them. "Have you noticed anyone hanging around the building?" Megan asked. Emily looked thoughtful. "Not really." "Why?" "There's been this car, a silver sedan, parked near Liam's school a few times this week. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid, but it keeps showing up." Emily's posture changed subtly, not alarmed, but alert. "Should I be more cautious when I'm out with him?" "I think so. Just keep an eye out." "Do you want me to walk him to school with you tomorrow? Maybe we can see if the car's there again." Megan nodded. "Yes. Let's do that." The next morning, they left early. Liam skipped a few steps ahead, humming under his breath. Emily kept pace with Megan, both of them scanning the streets with a quiet tension. This time, the sedan was nowhere in sight. Megan felt a brief wave of relief, though it did little to quiet the unease that had been building steadily all week. Later that afternoon, Megan decided to speak with the school directly. She made an appointment with the assistant principal, Miss Finch, a woman with a brisk but not unfriendly manner. They sat in her office, papers stacked neatly around them, the distant sound of students echoing down the hallway. "I just wanted to check in," Megan began. "Liam's been a little withdrawn lately. I know there was a recent change at home, and I'm trying to stay ahead of any impact it might be having here." Miss Finch nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Wallace. His teacher mentioned some concern. Nothing alarming, just that he sometimes seems distracted or hesitant to join group activities." "Has there been any change in how other kids treat him?" "Not that we've seen," Miss Finch said. "Though sometimes, these things are subtle. We can keep a closer eye and provide more structured support during free play. Would you be open to having our counselor speak with him informally?" "Yes. Please." Back at work that evening, Megan tried to focus on her shift, but the accumulation of subtle signals continued to tug at her concentration. She overheard one of her colleagues, a respiratory therapist named Janice, talking about a recent uptick in petty thefts near local schools. Someone had been posing as a delivery driver, loitering around campuses and trying to enter back gates. The school district had issued a general warning. That night, Megan found herself standing at Liam's bedroom door, watching him sleep. His breathing was soft and steady, his hands curled beneath his cheek. She remembered how he used to sleep sprawled out, limbs in every direction. Lately, he had been curling inward. She felt a growing responsibility to not only keep him safe but to stay one step ahead of whatever threat might be lurking, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically. The bruises had faded, but the tension hadn't. On Sunday, as they walked through the farmer's market, Liam spotted a booth selling handcrafted wooden toys. He stopped and stared at a miniature sailboat, its sails painted a bright blue. "You want to see it?" Megan asked. He nodded, but didn't move closer. The vendor, a man in his 60s, noticed and smiled. "It's okay, kiddo. You can hold it if you want." Liam took a step forward, then froze when someone behind them brushed past a little too quickly. Megan turned, just in time to catch a glimpse of a woman with a dark hood walking away. Nothing alarming, but the timing unsettled her. She crouched beside Liam. "It's okay. Just someone passing by." He didn't look convinced. They left shortly after that. That night, Megan reached out to a private security consultant, a contact given to her by a friend in emergency services. She didn't want guards or surveillance. What she wanted was assessment. Someone to walk her through safety blind spots she might be missing. Someone trained to recognize patterns she couldn't. The call was brief but reassuring. "We'll do a routine check," the consultant said. "No cost for the evaluation. You're not overreacting. Parents call us for this kind of thing more than you'd think." When they arrived 2 days later, a man and woman in plain clothes inspected the building, common areas, and the street surrounding the school. They found no obvious threats, no signs of anyone staking out the apartment or tracking movements. But the woman, a former detective, left Megan with a single piece of advice. Routine is good for kids. But it's also predictable for people looking to take advantage. Change up your pickup routes. Vary your departure times. Small changes can make a big difference. That night, Megan mapped out 3 alternate routes to the school, another 3 for work. She adjusted Liam's after-school schedule by 15 minutes. She asked Emily to switch up their afternoon park visits and stay off social media during work hours. The routine, once comfortable, now felt exposed, like a path too often walked, too easily followed. Megan wasn't paranoid. She was awake. And that awareness, though heavy, was what Liam needed most from her now. Wednesday started like any other, calm, deliberate, careful. Megan had already shifted into a rhythm of alertness that disguised itself well. Her mornings were orderly, her tone reassuring, but behind every packed lunch and every goodbye at the school gate was a second layer of focus, always scanning the environment, always watching for something out of place. The car hadn't returned. The hooded woman had not been seen again. But absence didn't mean safety, only a temporary silence. After dropping Liam off, Megan headed to the hospital to meet with her supervisor. She'd requested the meeting to discuss cutting back her hours more permanently. The response had been understanding, if cautious, the kind of empathy that carried with it a limit. Family first, her supervisor, Dr. Huang, had said kindly. "We'll work around it. But just so you know, we're stretched already." Megan nodded, knowing full well the balancing act she was now part of, parenting, protecting, and surviving all at once. As she left the building, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Alyssa, PTA Committee." Megan hesitated. She'd met Alyssa once at a school fundraiser, overly energetic, the kind of person who always had a clipboard in one hand and 3 projects in the other. Megan had never really engaged with the other parents, mostly out of time constraints, but now she picked up. "Hi, Alyssa. Everything all right?" "Oh, yes, nothing urgent," Alyssa chirped. "Actually, I wanted to ask, do you have a minute?" "I do," Megan said, walking toward her car. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," Alyssa began, her tone shifting slightly, "but I figured you'd want to know." Megan's hand froze on the car door. "Know what?" "Well, it's probably nothing, but I was at the school office yesterday and overheard something strange. One of the office aides was talking about the pickup logs. Apparently someone, not you, tried to sign out Liam last week." Megan felt the breath catch in her throat. "What do you mean?" "Someone came in and gave his name. Said they were there to take him home. But when the aide asked for ID, the person said they forgot it and left. It wasn't reported, I think because nothing happened, but it stuck with me. I recognized the name, and I knew you might want to hear it. Do you know what day that was?" Megan's voice had gone tight, controlled. "Tuesday, I think. Around 1 in the afternoon." Megan closed her eyes, recalling the day instantly. Emily had taken Liam to school while Megan worked a morning shift. She'd arrived for pickup as usual. Nothing had seemed off, Liam hadn't said anything. No mention from the staff. "Did they describe the person?" she asked. "I don't know if there was a full report, but I can ask discreetly. I just thought, if it were my kid, I'd want to know." "Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate this. Really." As soon as she hung up, Megan drove directly to the school. Her hands trembled slightly as she parked, but her voice remained even as she approached the front desk. The receptionist smiled. "Hi, Mrs. Wallace. Everything all right?" "I just had a quick question about the pickup logs," Megan said. "Someone told me there might have been an incident last week, someone trying to sign Liam out early." The receptionist blinked, then looked slightly uncomfortable. "Oh, yes, there was something odd. I didn't realize no one followed up with you." Megan's voice sharpened. "What happened?" "Well, a man came in. Gave Liam's name. Said he was there for early pickup, but when I asked for ID, he said he forgot it and seemed nervous. When I said he couldn't sign Liam out without proper authorization, he left. I assumed he might have been confused or at the wrong school. Did he give a name? No, just Liam's name. Did anyone see which direction he went? We're not sure. We didn't have security walk him out, he left quickly. Megan exhaled slowly through her nose. I need you to document this and notify the principal. And from now on, Liam is not to be released to anyone but me, in person. Even Emily needs prior approval, every time. The receptionist nodded, her face flushing slightly. Of course. I'm really sorry. As Megan left the building, her heart pounded with a cold clarity. Someone had tried to take her son. There was no other explanation. Whoever it was knew Liam's full name, knew where and when to come, and had counted on a system too loose to stop them. And yet, no one had thought it serious enough to call her. Back at home, she pulled up the app from the security consultant she had hired the week before. There was a section to submit incident reports, and Megan documented everything: the date, the time, the description, the fact that no name had been given. She then called the consultant directly. This just crossed a line, she said. We need to escalate. Understood, the woman replied. I'll have one of our analysts meet with you in person. Tomorrow morning? Yes. Megan hung up and sat in silence for a long moment. Then she stood and called Emily. Can you come early tomorrow? She asked. I need to meet with someone. It's about Liam's safety. Emily didn't hesitate. I'll be there. That night, Megan sat with Liam at the kitchen table while he worked through a puzzle book. She tried to keep her voice light. Did anything strange happen at school last week? Liam looked up, confused. Like what? Anyone come to get you early? Someone who wasn't me or Emily? He frowned. No. I don't think so. Did anyone ask you to leave the classroom or say you were being picked up? No. I stayed in class the whole time. Megan nodded, masking her worry. All right. Just making sure. The next morning, the security analyst arrived, a quiet, serious man named Reed, dressed in plain clothes with a discreet badge clipped to his belt. He walked through the building, asked Megan a series of precise questions, and took photographs of entry points. This wasn't random, he said after an hour of review. Whoever came to the school had information, at least a name and routine. What can I do? Megan asked. Short term, vary your schedule even more. Talk to the school about installing a more secure pickup system, badge check, even a private code. Longer term, you may want to request footage from surrounding businesses on that day, see if the person was captured on camera. If this happens again, it becomes a law enforcement issue. Megan nodded, taking mental notes of everything. I want to stay ahead of it. You're doing that already, Reed said. Most people don't act until it's too late. You're 3 steps ahead. Stay there. Later that afternoon, Megan called the school district office and demanded to speak with someone from the Safety Oversight Committee. She wasn't angry, not yet, but she was unwavering. Her voice didn't crack. She asked about surveillance footage, asked about access records, and requested a full internal review of how sign-out attempts were logged. That evening, as she sat with Liam reading on the couch, her mind returned to the silver sedan. The hooded woman. The attempt to sign him out. Individually, these events were inconclusive. Together, they were forming a pattern she couldn't ignore. Something, or someone, was watching her son. And now, Megan knew they were close enough to make a move. By the time the weekend arrived, Megan was operating on instinct more than routine. Each day brought her closer to a reality she hadn't fully wanted to accept, that someone had intentionally tried to reach her son, and that whoever it was remained unknown. The days no longer passed in the usual order, they pulsed, alert and measured, like time had become elastic, expanding and contracting depending on her fear. She reviewed every detail again, this time with a notepad in hand. The silver car. The hooded woman. The early pickup attempt. Even Liam's subtle shifts, the quiet pauses before he answered, the way he lingered near doors before entering. None of it screamed danger on its own. But together, it had built an undeniable case. And Megan was no longer willing to wait for the next step to come from someone else. That Sunday evening, as Liam was working through a coloring book on the living room floor, Megan sat at the dining table with her laptop open. She wasn't looking at work emails. Instead, she had a tab open with listings for short-term rentals, another with private schooling options, and a third with contact information for a local legal advisor. She wasn't just planning anymore. She was preparing to act. Emily arrived the next morning and found Megan already dressed, her coat draped over her arm and her bag slung across her shoulder. "I need a couple hours this morning," Megan said quietly. "Can you stay here with Liam until I get back? I'll walk him to school when I return." Emily studied her for a moment. "Everything okay?" "No," Megan admitted. "But I'm handling it." She drove across town to a quiet office building tucked behind a stretch of professional suites. On the second floor, she met with a legal consultant who specialized in emergency family protections, custody arrangements, restraining orders, school safety clauses. Megan presented her notes, the school incident, and the documented conversations she'd had. The consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Denise, listened carefully. "Has there been any contact from the person who attempted to pick him up?" "No. Nothing. No name, no follow-up." "Which actually makes it worse," Denise said. "It implies caution. Planning. You're right to escalate." They discussed two key moves: a legal notice to the school requiring them to follow a more restrictive custody protocol, and the early preparation of a temporary relocation plan. Megan wasn't leaving yet, but if anything else happened, anything, she wanted the freedom to remove Liam from the city without a long trail of paperwork. After finalizing the legal documents, Megan drove back across town to meet with a property agent she'd contacted late the night before. The agent showed her two listings, both short-term furnished apartments in secure buildings. One was tucked into a residential block near the art museum, the other, on the edge of a mixed-use district with private security posted at each entrance. She liked the second one immediately: discreet, clean, with controlled access and a private elevator. By noon, she had placed a hold on the unit for potential move-in within 72 hours. When she returned home, Emily was on the couch helping Liam with a geography app. Megan pulled her aside briefly. "I found a backup place to stay. Just in case. Fully furnished. Gated building." Emily's brow furrowed. "You think you'll need to go?" "I don't know," Megan said. "But I won't be caught off guard." That afternoon, while Liam was at school, Megan began packing a discreet go bag, one for herself, one for Liam. Just essentials: clothing, documents, toiletries, a few comfort items for Liam. She also added Liam's immunization records, her medical ID badge, and two small notebooks, one with financial contacts, the other with school and hospital information. That night, Megan and Emily sat on the balcony after Liam had gone to bed. The street below was quiet, the windows across the way glowing amber with evening light. "He won't understand if we leave," Emily said softly. "Not right away." "I know," Megan replied. "But I'll make sure he knows it's not punishment. That we're just making sure he's okay." "Do you think this is permanent?" "I don't know what this is yet. I just know that someone crossed a line." Emily nodded. "And you've done everything right. Most people don't see the threat until it's already on them." "I can't afford that," Megan said. "Not with him." The following morning, Megan met again with the school counselor, Ms. Ellison. She explained that Liam had been experiencing heightened anxiety, and she wanted to authorize additional discretion around who could approach him on campus. His previous caregiver, Sarah, she's no longer involved, Megan clarified. "No one but myself or Emily should speak with him, move him, or interact with him during school hours." Ms. Ellison took notes carefully, clearly aware this was not a casual conversation. "Should we notify district security?" "Not yet," Megan said. "But if anything else happens, I'll contact them directly." When she returned home that evening, Megan received a call from Denise, the legal advisor. I reviewed the school's pickup procedures, Denise said. They're too relaxed. I've drafted an official notice requiring Liam's school to adopt an emergency custody hold designation. It's not a legal restriction, but it alerts staff to treat his release protocol as high risk. Send it, Megan said immediately. That night, Megan sat with Liam as he sorted through his books. Hey, she said softly. Can I ask you something important? He nodded, turning to her. If we needed to stay somewhere new for a while, not forever, just for a little while, would that be okay? Like a hotel? Sort of. A safe place, with beds, and your books and everything you need. Liam thought for a moment. Would Emily come? If you wanted her to, yes. He nodded slowly. Okay. Can I bring Dinosaur? Of course. She smiled and kissed the top of his head. That's all I need to know. The final decision came the next morning. As Megan was locking the front door, her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail, from the front office at Liam's school. She pressed play. Hi, Mrs. Wallace. This is Trina from the front desk. Just wanted to let you know someone was spotted near the west parking lot today asking about student release times. They didn't come inside, but a staff member reported the behavior. Just a heads up. Let us know if you'd like us to document it formally. Megan didn't hesitate. She dialed Denise. We're moving. I'm not waiting another day. By afternoon, she and Emily had packed the rest of their essentials. Megan picked Liam up early and didn't tell the school where they were going, only that she would contact them soon with Liam's updated address and emergency contacts. When they arrived at the secure apartment complex, the lobby was empty, the lighting soft. The elevator required a keycard. The front desk staff checked their IDs before handing over the unit's access chip. Inside, the apartment was simple but comfortable. A view of the city skyline framed the living room windows, and Liam's eyes widened when he saw the stack of books and puzzles Megan had arranged in the corner ahead of time. Is this our new house? He asked. Just for now, Megan said. A little adventure. A safe one. He looked around. It's quiet here. Yes, Megan whispered. That's the point. She stepped into the hallway, dialed Emily, and said only one sentence. We're in. And we're staying until I say otherwise. The first 3 days in the new apartment passed in a careful rhythm. Megan woke early, showered in silence, and made breakfast while Liam still slept. She moved through the kitchen with quiet deliberation, appreciating the apartment's insulation from outside noise and its floor-to-ceiling windows that filtered in the morning light but kept prying eyes out. There was no city chatter, no footsteps overhead, no knocks on the door, just stillness, the kind that offered her a breath she hadn't known she needed. Liam adapted faster than she anticipated. At first, he wandered from room to room, studying the unfamiliar corners and tapping the unfamiliar walls. But by the second morning, he had already claimed a spot on the living room rug for his coloring books and started storing his toy dinosaur under the edge of the sofa, calling it the cave. Megan had kept her promise. The move was framed as an adventure, a chance to explore new routines and rest from the noise of everything else. She didn't lie. But she didn't share everything either. Not the part about a stranger asking questions near his school. Not the phone calls, or the legal filings, or the way she now double-checked locks 3 times before bed. Emily joined them each afternoon, arriving through the secured parking garage and buzzing herself up with a temporary keycard Megan had requested from the front office. Her presence anchored the space with a sense of normalcy. She brought new activities for Liam, taught him how to make simple origami figures, and set up a small indoor herb garden on the windowsill. Megan found herself breathing easier with Emily nearby, though she never let her guard down fully. On Thursday, Megan started work remotely, using a temporary flex agreement negotiated with the hospital's administration. It wasn't ideal, her role was hands-on by design, but she could consult, review case files, and participate in patient planning remotely for a limited time. It allowed her to stay close, to remain the buffer between her son and whatever unknown force had been creeping closer in the shadows. During one video call with her supervisor, Dr. Huang asked gently, "Is there anything we need to be worried about on your end?" Megan hesitated before answering. "Not yet. But I'm taking precautions. I'll be back on site when I can give the job my full attention." Her tone didn't invite further questions. That night, she sat on the couch reviewing Liam's new school options. She had already informed his previous school of the relocation and filed a formal transfer notice. It was accepted without delay, and she was granted a temporary exemption to homeschool while arrangements were made. Still, Megan knew this limbo couldn't last much longer. Children needed routine, not just structure, but community, stability, and safe patterns. She narrowed the list down to 3 schools, all with limited enrollment, small class sizes, and enhanced security. The one she favored most offered a trauma-informed learning environment, with staff trained to recognize behavioral cues and build individualized support plans. It was across town, but reachable within 20 minutes in traffic. The next morning, she called to schedule a private tour. The administrator, a woman named Maribel, sounded thoughtful and attentive over the phone. "We've worked with families in transition before," she said. "We know how much of this process lives in the details." That afternoon, while Liam and Emily painted birds on construction paper, Megan visited the campus. It was nestled between 2 residential blocks, with a gated entrance and camera monitoring at every corner. No one could enter without clearance. The classrooms had large windows but were positioned inward toward an enclosed courtyard, and student movement was limited to secured areas. Inside, the walls were filled with soft colors, affirming phrases, and rotating art created by the children themselves. It was a place designed to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. As Maribel walked her through the campus, she explained their protocols in case of unauthorized access, lockdown situations, and family confidentiality. "No visitors without prior ID verification," she said firmly. "And children are never released without 2-step parent confirmation." By the time the tour ended, Megan felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, a flicker of trust in an environment she didn't control. She returned to the apartment and found Liam and Emily deep in conversation about planets. Liam looked up when she entered, his eyes lighting up. "Emily says Jupiter's made of gas but has storms that are bigger than Earth." "She's right," Megan said, sitting beside him. "You want to learn more about it tomorrow?" He nodded enthusiastically. "Can we build a model?" "We can start it tonight if you want." He smiled, then turned back to his paper, sketching an orange sphere surrounded by swirling lines. Later that night, after Liam was asleep, Emily lingered a few minutes longer before heading out. "There's something I've been meaning to mention," she said, her voice low. Megan looked up sharply. "What is it?" "Earlier this week, when I took out the trash, Tuesday morning, I think, there was a delivery van idling in the alley behind the building. It didn't seem unusual at first. But I saw the same van later that day, parked across the street." "Did you get a plate number?" "No, sorry. But it had a logo, something generic. I didn't recognize the company. Could be nothing, but it didn't feel random." Megan's face remained still. "Let me handle it." After Emily left, Megan checked the building's security feed. She had requested guest access to the digital logs through the front desk. She scanned the camera footage from Tuesday and found what she was looking for, a white delivery van with faded lettering idling by the back alley at 8 in the morning. It reappeared again at 2:30, parked near the curb outside the complex. She zoomed in on the footage. The driver never left the vehicle. No package was delivered. No one entered the building. It had waited. The next morning, she reported the footage to the building's private security team and asked them to document the incident. She requested an increase in patrols for the next week and offered to pay the difference herself. She also submitted the van's image to the same security consultant who had visited her home, Reed, along with a message, "Unknown vehicle. No delivery. 2 appearances. Possibly tracking." Reed responded within 30 minutes, "We're running a plate scan. Stay on high alert. Recommend tracking Liam's route if you return him to in-person school." Megan didn't respond immediately. She sat at the kitchen table, watching the light fade from the windows, and felt the familiar tension return. This wasn't over. Whoever was out there, whatever they wanted, they hadn't given up. But neither had she. She looked down at the school enrollment form, already half filled, then turned it over and began drafting a new plan. Routes. Backup contacts. Surveillance log. Change had become the new constant. But this time, it would be on her terms. By the start of the next week, Megan had finalized Liam's enrollment at the trauma-informed school. The paperwork was processed swiftly, aided by a direct conversation she had with Maribel, who arranged for a gradual start, a half-day introduction followed by staggered attendance across the first week. Megan didn't want Liam overwhelmed. Trust, after all, was not something her son gave quickly anymore. Nor did she. That Monday morning, Megan prepared Liam's lunch in silence while he sat by the window, watching the sky. The city below them remained unchanged, but their place in it had shifted again. No longer hiding, but not fully visible either. "You remember we're going to a new school today, right?" she said without turning. "Yeah," Liam replied. "With the courtyard and the big window?" "That's the one." "Will I stay the whole day?" "Just until lunch. I'll be close by. And if you want to leave sooner, you just tell them. You don't have to do anything that doesn't feel okay." Liam nodded and went back to his drawing, a large green circle with small blue dots scattered inside it. "What's that one?" Megan asked as she glanced over. "It's Earth," he said, "but the dots are places people don't see." Later that morning, Megan and Liam walked into the school together. A staff member greeted them at the gate and guided them to a transition room, a cozy space filled with bean bags, floor lamps, and small tactile stations for drawing, puzzles, and sensory play. A counselor named Lydia met with Liam privately, starting with a gentle conversation about his favorite animals. Megan waited just outside the room with Maribel. "We usually allow for 2 or 3 days of light interaction before full integration," Maribel explained. "The goal is to let him explore the space without pressure. Our staff will follow his lead." "He's cautious," Megan said. "But he watches everything. If someone's not being genuine, he'll feel it. We believe kids notice what adults think they can hide. He'll be in good hands here." Liam remained in the room for over an hour without asking to leave. Megan watched through the small observation window as he gradually migrated from the bean bag to the drawing table, then engaged with a memory-matching game alongside another boy with dark curly hair. There was no explosion of joy, no loud chatter, just a quiet shift in body language. Shoulders uncurled, feet steadied, eyes lifted. When Megan rejoined him at noon, he looked up and said, "Can I come back tomorrow?" Back at the apartment that afternoon, she finally unpacked the last of their boxes, a task she'd avoided until now. The act felt ceremonial. They weren't running anymore, and though she remained alert, the desperation had faded. In its place, a steady discipline took root. Preparedness, not panic. That evening, Emily arrived with a set of books on child resilience and trauma-informed caregiving. "I picked these up from a colleague who works in child development," she said. "Some are written for parents. One of them is illustrated, might help Liam put language to some of what he's experienced." Megan flipped through the books slowly. "Thank you. I've been looking for a way to help him talk more freely. I just don't want to push." "You won't have to. If he's given safe space, he'll move toward it when he's ready." Later that night, Megan sat beside Liam on his bed as he flipped through one of the illustrated books. It depicted a fox hiding in a forest, frightened by strange sounds that didn't seem to come from anywhere. As the story progressed, the fox met other animals who had also hidden, some in trees, some under rocks. Eventually, the fox built a small den not to hide in, but to invite others into. Liam looked up halfway through. "This fox doesn't fight anything." "No," Megan replied. "He just learns not to be alone." "Is that better?" "Sometimes." The next day, Megan received a call from Reed, the private security consultant. "We found the van. Or at least a match, he said. It's registered under a company that doesn't exist anymore. The license was recycled to a fleet that was sold 6 months ago. That usually means someone's using an inactive identity to stay off-grid. Did you get a visual? Only partials. Nothing you can take to the police yet. But we're monitoring. And we're running image recognition across other flagged surveillance zones in the city. Anything else I should be doing? Keep logging everything. Time stamps, locations, people. Even interactions that feel irrelevant. This is a slow build. They may try something again, or not. But documentation makes everything stronger. Megan thanked him and ended the call. She opened a clean notebook and began logging the past 2 weeks in crisp detail: times, names, dates, vehicles, facial features, even ambient sound when she could remember it. Each entry anchored her. If someone tried to reach Liam again, they wouldn't be met with confusion. They'd be met with evidence. By the end of the week, Liam was attending full days at the new school. He'd begun to mention the names of classmates and describe parts of his day without prompting. Megan noticed how his drawings changed too. There were still storms and meteor strikes, but now they were followed by images of shelter, treehouses, space domes, islands surrounded by calm water. One morning, as they stood in line at the small cafe near the school, a woman ahead of them dropped her wallet. Liam bent quickly to pick it up and handed it to her. "Thank you, sweetie," the woman said. Liam smiled, then glanced up at Megan for a moment before returning his eyes to the ground. After the woman left, Megan leaned down. "You okay?" He nodded. "She just reminded me of someone." "Who?" "I don't know. But not in a bad way." Megan didn't push. But later that night, she opened a new entry in her notebook and wrote, "First spontaneous social response to a stranger. No visible distress. Mild hesitation. Positive recovery." The change wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a turning point wrapped in music and clarity. But it was real. By the start of the following week, Megan had resumed 2 on-site hospital shifts. Emily remained with Liam during those hours, picking him up after school and walking him home along one of their 3 new alternating routes. The apartment felt more lived in now. Not permanent, she still didn't think of it that way, but not temporary either. It was theirs, and it was working. On Friday evening, as they sat around the dinner table finishing a makeshift taco night, Liam looked up from his plate. "Can we invite someone over?" Megan raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Max. From school. He likes space too." "We'll see," Megan said carefully. "Maybe next week." He nodded. Then, after a pause, added, "We don't have to tell him everything." "No," Megan agreed. "We tell people only what we want them to know." Liam smiled and went back to eating, the kind of smile that was no longer cautious but entirely his. The beginning wasn't perfect. It was built from fragments of safety, strategy, and the strength that comes from refusing to be passive. But it was beginning all the same. The days that followed Liam's request to invite a friend over unfolded with quiet but unmistakable momentum. It was a small gesture, almost casual in its delivery, yet it marked a shift Megan had long hoped for, the return of outward confidence in her son. She had seen hints of it over the past week, the way he asked questions in public without looking to her first, how he began suggesting new afternoon activities with Emily, and the fact that he now walked into his new school with his shoulders relaxed rather than hunched in caution. Megan didn't rush the process. Instead, she met with Max's mother, Anna, that same week. They arranged to meet in the courtyard of the school after pickup. Anna was warm, reserved but clearly engaged. She was a single parent too, recently moved to the city after a job relocation, and her tone as she spoke with Megan was both kind and direct. "Our boys seem to have found each other fast," Anna said with a small smile. "Max's teacher said they've been building whole planets out of modeling clay." "They're both a little quieter than the other kids," Megan replied. "But they match each other's rhythm. I think that helps." They agreed to a short playdate at a public park not far from the school, neutral ground, easy to exit if anything felt off. The plan was simple: a shared snack, some sidewalk chalk, and enough space for the boys to explore without pressure. Megan arrived early, scanned the area like she always did now, and positioned herself on a bench where she could see every path in and out of the play space. When Anna and Max arrived, the greeting was smooth, comfortable. Liam gave a soft wave and immediately showed Max the chalk box Megan had packed. Without waiting for instruction, the boys knelt and began drawing constellations, narrating their creations with whispered excitement. The conversation was muffled, but Megan caught phrases like crater dome and alien radio tower drifting between giggles. Anna sat beside Megan, watching the boys with quiet satisfaction. "It's good to see him laugh," Anna said. Max used to be more social, but the move shook him up a little. "I get that," Megan replied. "We've had some transitions of our own." "You've done a good job," Anna said, eyes still on the kids. "You can see it in him." Megan wasn't used to compliments that cut that close. She simply nodded and kept her gaze steady on Liam, who now stood with his arms stretched wide, describing the rings of a planet only he could see. That night, after the play date, Megan tucked Liam into bed and lingered at the doorway. He was flipping through a book on deep-sea creatures, his eyes drooping with the slow pull of sleep. "Did you have fun today?" she asked. "Yeah. Max is cool. He said he wants to build a space station next time." Megan smiled. "We can do that. We've got enough cardboard for a whole galaxy." Liam laughed, then turned back to his book. Before Megan left the room, he said softly, "I didn't think I'd want to have friends again. But I like it now." She stood still in the doorway for a long moment after the lights were off, holding that sentence in the center of her chest like a candle in a quiet room. The next few weeks unfolded with growing steadiness. Megan increased her hospital shift slightly, returning for 3 days a week while still maintaining flexibility. Emily adjusted her schedule accordingly, now managing school pickup and after-school care independently on those days. Megan remained in contact with Reed, who confirmed that the van seen earlier had not reappeared. Surveillance logs had gone cold, and no further inquiries about Liam had been reported. That didn't mean the threat was gone, only dormant. Megan stayed ready. Her security routines remained intact, but her body no longer responded with adrenaline to every small change. That, too, was a kind of healing. On a Wednesday morning in late spring, Megan sat across from Lydia, the school counselor, during a routine parent update. "Liam's progress is exactly what we hope to see in kids adjusting to change," Lydia said. "He's forming relationships, participating actively in projects, and showing strong emotional regulation." "Does he ever talk about his past caregiver? Or what happened before?" "Not directly. But he sometimes refers to rules that change, or things that weren't supposed to happen. We let him bring those ideas into his play when they come up, we don't press for details. That's a boundary we respect." Megan nodded, relieved. "That's how we've handled it at home, too." Lydia continued. "He's very responsive to structure now. It helps him feel safe. But more importantly, he's beginning to trust people to keep their word. That's harder to rebuild than you'd think." That phrase lingered with Megan, trust rebuilt slowly, by consistent word-keeping. It echoed something she had come to understand herself in recent weeks. Trust wasn't restored by apologies or explanations. It came back piece by piece through everyday actions, showing up, staying present, and not flinching when the past threatened to resurface. At home, Liam began asking more complex questions. Not about what had happened, but about why people sometimes make decisions that hurt others, even when they say they care. Like when someone says they'll watch you but then looks away? Megan answered slowly. Sometimes people think they're doing enough, and they don't realize they're not paying attention. Does that mean they're bad? Not always. But it means you get to decide if there's someone you can trust. Liam considered that for a long moment. "I think I can trust Emily." "You definitely can. And Max. And his mom. She makes really good sandwiches." Megan smiled. I think you're building a good team. As spring edged closer to summer, Liam's school held its first community event of the year, a family picnic on the campus lawn. Megan hesitated when the invitation came home. Part of her wanted to decline, to keep their life private, contained. But when she saw Liam's eyes light up at the mention of the picnic, she didn't say no. They arrived early on the day of the event. Emily joined them, carrying a cooler filled with fruit and sandwiches. Max and Anna appeared not long after, followed by other families. There was music playing softly from a speaker, picnic blankets spread out across the grass, and clusters of children chasing bubbles under the sun. Megan sat back and watched as Liam ran to join the others. His steps were sure. His laughter unguarded. There were still shadows, there always would be, but he wasn't walking through them alone anymore. Later in the afternoon, he brought Megan a juice box and plopped down beside her. "I want to stay here a long time," he said. "We'll stay as long as we need," Megan replied. He leaned against her side, and for a while, neither of them said anything. The music continued in the background. The scent of grilled vegetables and sunscreen lingered in the air. Megan let herself breathe deeply, fully, without scanning the edges of the field for threats. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't preparing for something to go wrong. She was simply living in the part that was going right. The warm momentum of spring continued to soften the edges of Megan's tightly wound routine. It wasn't that she relaxed completely, the quiet vigilance that had taken root in her after those chaotic weeks never really left, but she began allowing herself to see the present for what it was, rather than what it might become. There was, finally, space to think about things beyond survival, Liam's interests, her own stalled ambitions, and the many small ways in which their life had quietly been rebuilt. The day the email came from the hospital's community engagement department, Megan almost deleted it without reading. Subject line: Family Wellness Panel, Parent Speakers Needed. But something about the message made her pause. The event, it explained, was part of a quarterly series aimed at helping local families better navigate healthcare systems, early child development concerns, and common home challenges. This time, they were focusing on childhood transitions and caregiver vigilance. There was one sentence that made her sit up straighter: "We are looking for a parent willing to share personal experience with childcare awareness and the importance of proactive response in uncertain circumstances." She reread it. Then read it again. And after sitting with the thought for a full day, she replied with a short message: "I may have something worth contributing." The coordinator replied that same evening, warmly inviting her for a short phone call to discuss the panel format. Megan expected something overly formal, but the woman on the other end, Rachel, had a quiet, patient tone. "Your name was actually recommended by one of our pediatric case consultants," Rachel explained. She didn't give details, of course, but said you handled a sensitive situation with insight and resolve. Megan didn't ask which consultant. She had her guesses. Instead, she said, "I wouldn't call what I did extraordinary." "Sometimes what's most valuable isn't extraordinary," Rachel said. "It's honest. Measured. Lived." They scheduled the panel for the following Thursday evening. It would be held at the community wing of the hospital, a wide, open room with a small stage, chairs set in a semicircle, and room for about 50 guests. Megan would speak for no more than 10 minutes, then join a Q&A with 2 other parents and a clinical social worker. When she told Emily about the panel, her friend's reaction was instant. "You should absolutely do it," Emily said. "You've been navigating all of this in silence for weeks. Maybe it's time someone else learned from what you went through." "I'm not sure how much I want to share." "You don't have to tell them everything," Emily said. "But what you have lived is worth more than you think." That weekend, Megan started drafting what she would say. Not a full speech, she didn't want to sound rehearsed, but fragments of memory and reflection. The first time she saw the bruises. The uneasy silence from Liam. The empty glance Sarah gave when asked about the day. And how quickly the question of what happened became "how did I miss it?" She wrote through the nights. Not just facts, but feelings, fear turning into certainty, uncertainty turning into decision, and decision turning into strength. The day of the panel arrived with a gentle breeze and the faint smell of blooming trees drifting through the city. Megan left Liam with Emily for the evening, promising him she'd be back in time for bedtime stories. He nodded and said, "Tell them the part about the rocket ship. The one we made from cereal boxes." "I'll try," she smiled. At the hospital, the event space had already begun to fill. Parents took their seats slowly, many holding notebooks, some with young children beside them. The panelists were introduced one by one: a father who had helped his daughter through selective mutism, a mother whose son had sensory regulation challenges, and Megan. She stood quietly as the coordinator gave her introduction: a pediatric nurse, a single mother, and someone who faced difficult questions with grace and fierce clarity. Megan stepped forward, her palms briefly damp, but her voice calm. "I'm not an expert in child psychology," she began. "I'm not a counselor or a specialist. I'm just a parent. But I do work in healthcare, and I thought I understood risk." She paused, letting her eyes move slowly across the room. "When something felt wrong with my son, small things, at first, I told myself I was imagining it. The bruises had explanations. The silence could be normal. The discomfort in my own gut. I tried to suppress it because it was inconvenient. Because I trusted someone I thought was trustworthy." A few heads in the audience nodded slowly. A woman in the back crossed her arms tightly, listening with narrowed eyes. "But children don't always tell us what's wrong in clear language. And it's not because they're hiding the truth. It's because they're still learning which truths are safe to share." Megan told them only what she needed to: how she started documenting, how she responded when Liam's school failed to notify her of a suspicious incident, and how she eventually removed him from the environment entirely. "I learned that action doesn't always come from certainty. Sometimes it comes from noticing the patterns, honoring the unease, and being willing to change everything, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's expensive, even when no one else sees what you see." She ended her speech quietly. "No one is coming to save your child better than you can. That doesn't mean you have to do it alone. But it does mean you have to believe what you see, even when others don't." The room remained quiet for a full breath before a wave of applause broke out, subdued but sincere. During the Q&A, several parents asked follow-up questions. "How do you know when to act? What if you suspect but can't prove? How did you rebuild your child's trust?" Megan answered as best she could. "Not with clinical theory, but with lived clarity. You don't need proof to create a safer routine," she said. "You don't need permission to change who watches your child. And rebuilding trust starts with consistency, showing up, listening without interruption, and never minimizing what they say." After the panel ended, two mothers approached her privately. One asked for resources on safety planning. The other simply said, "Thank you. I didn't know I was allowed to feel what I've been feeling." When Megan returned home, Liam was already in bed. Emily sat at the table, reading, and looked up when Megan entered. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think it helped someone," Megan replied. "Maybe more than one." Emily smiled. "That's more than most people do in a year." That night, as Megan sat beside Liam's bed and brushed his hair back from his forehead, he opened one eye and whispered, "Did you talk about the rocket?" "I did." "Did they like it?" "They did." He grinned and rolled onto his side. Megan sat there long after he fell asleep, the memory of the panel echoing through her. She hadn't shared her story to be applauded. She'd shared it because it was hers. And because, somewhere out there, another parent might now listen a little closer when something small didn't feel right. That, she realized, was the lesson. Not every battle needed to leave a scar. Some just needed to leave a map. The week after the panel, Megan noticed something curious. Her inbox began filling with short, heartfelt messages from unfamiliar names, some hospital staff, others community members who had attended the event or heard about it through secondhand channels. They weren't long or dramatic, just sincere acknowledgments. "Thank you for your honesty. You said something I couldn't put into words. I didn't realize other people were living this too." At first, she replied cautiously, unsure how much of herself to extend beyond that evening. But then came an email from a mother named Joy, whose message included a photo of her daughter and a confession. I stayed quiet too long. I thought I had to wait until it was obvious. But listening to you gave me permission to speak up before something happened. That single message shifted something. Megan realized the value of sharing didn't end with the panel, it was a door, not a destination. And now, people were stepping through it. Later that week, Rachel, the coordinator of the event, reached out again. I was wondering, she said over the phone, if you'd be open to something more ongoing. Like what? We've been piloting a community engagement series, small, in-person circles for parents and caregivers. Less formal than a panel. More about sharing experiences. Real talk in a protected space. We'd love to have someone like you lead one of the sessions. Megan was silent for a beat. I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead. You wouldn't be teaching, Rachel clarified. You'd be anchoring. Sharing, guiding the flow, helping others feel safe enough to speak. It's less about having answers and more about helping others ask better questions. I can do that, Megan said, surprised by the calm in her own voice. The first circle was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. They kept it intentionally small, no more than 10 participants, and held it in a community room at a local library. The setting was quiet and neutral, with low lighting and chairs arranged in a gentle oval, no table in between. On each chair sat a small card with 3 prompts. What have you noticed? What do you wonder? What are you afraid to say out loud? Megan arrived early. She didn't dress up. She didn't prepare a speech. She came only as herself, carrying the same small notebook she had used to document Liam's early signs of distress. It was worn now, the edges curled and marked with folds, but she brought it as a reminder, not just of what had happened, but of the way her quiet attention had changed everything. Participants arrived slowly. One woman entered with a tight expression, clutching a worn scarf as if it were armor. A father with deep lines beneath his eyes nodded politely but didn't speak. Another young mother arrived with a stroller and a quiet toddler who eventually fell asleep with their head on her shoulder. When it was time to begin, Megan cleared her throat gently. Thank you for coming, she said. This isn't therapy. It's not a class. It's just a space for you to talk. You don't have to share if you're not ready. You don't have to explain what brought you here. You just have to be present. There was a long pause, the kind that often follows an invitation to vulnerability. Then someone spoke. I think I've been watching my son go numb for 3 months, said the woman with the scarf. And I kept thinking, maybe he's tired. Maybe it's the school. But now I'm not sure anymore. Another voice followed. I work nights, said the man. I thought I was managing. My daughter says she's fine. But last week she asked me why I never know when she's sad. I didn't have an answer. The young mother with the sleeping child said nothing. But her eyes were wet, and Megan caught the way her hand moved protectively over her child's back in slow, steady circles. Megan didn't offer solutions. She didn't reference her background or her job or the panel she had led. She simply said, children don't always announce their distress. Sometimes, they whisper it through what they stop doing. That first session ran over by almost 40 minutes. No one moved to leave. Even after the room was officially closed, people lingered in the parking lot, exchanging names, numbers, and for some, brief but honest confessions that they hadn't planned to say aloud. By the second session, the group had nearly doubled. Word spread, not through advertising but through quiet recommendations. A colleague told another. A teacher referred a parent. One participant brought her teenage son, who had asked to come after hearing his mother talk about it. Emily joined one of the later sessions as a guest, offering her experience from the caregiver's perspective. She spoke about what it meant to care for a child who had gone through a period of fear, and how important it was to honor a child's pace, not the adult schedule. Sometimes what they need isn't to be told it's okay, she said. Sometimes they just need you to stop pretending everything's fine and sit with them in the hard parts. Megan watched the reactions around the room, the slow nods, the deep breaths, the way hands unconsciously reached for tissues or pressed over hearts. After the third session, Rachel invited Megan to a closed meeting with other coordinators. They wanted to expand the format, create a rotating schedule of facilitators, and build a more sustainable model for the Community Circle program. Megan was hesitant at first, not out of reluctance, but because she didn't want her voice to become a symbol, something polished and paraded. "I'm not a cautionary tale," she said during the meeting. "And I don't want to become a figurehead. I just want to help people see earlier, listen harder, and respond without shame." "That's exactly why you're the right person," Rachel replied. The proposal was accepted. Megan would co-lead the next quarter series with another parent facilitator, alternating locations across the city, libraries, school gyms, even places of worship that opened their doors for neutral programming. One afternoon, after a planning session, Megan returned home to find Liam building a security fort out of blankets and laundry baskets. "This is where we go if the aliens come," he explained, dragging a flashlight into the center. "And how do we know the aliens are coming?" Megan asked, amused. "They knock," he said solemnly. "But if we don't trust the knock, we don't open the door." She crouched beside the fort and whispered, "You're getting good at this." "I learned from the best," Liam said with a grin. Megan didn't correct him. He was right. But she had learned too, not from books or protocols or training, but from staying, watching, listening. From sharing her own experience and making space for others to share theirs. That night, she updated her notebook for the first time in a week. The last line she wrote was simple. "Helping others heal does not delay your own healing." Sometimes, it's the same thing. The last days of summer arrived like a slow exhale. The heat softened. Mornings grew cooler. And for the first time in many months, Megan noticed that her body wasn't tensed for the next disruption. She moved through her days with quiet steadiness, not because everything had gone back to normal, but because something new had taken root. Not safety, not certainty, but something even more important, purpose. The latest parent circle had just concluded its third cycle. Attendance had nearly tripled since the spring, and the program was now supported by the hospital's community health division. Megan no longer carried the entire weight of each session. 2 other facilitators had joined, both parents who had once sat in the same chairs, once uncertain they even belonged in the room. Now they opened the discussions with confidence, guiding others with the same care Megan had once offered them. She watched this transformation with quiet awe. One evening, as she packed up after a session held in a converted community center gym, she found herself approached by a man she hadn't seen before. Mid-30s, worn baseball cap, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his jacket. "I almost didn't come," he said without introduction. "I thought it was going to be a bunch of people complaining." Megan smiled, unoffended. "That's fair. Some people expect that. But you stayed." He nodded. "I have 2 boys. They're not doing great. I used to think they just needed structure. But tonight I realized maybe I haven't really been paying attention to what's under the surface." She said nothing, letting his own words hold space. "I don't have a story like yours," he added. "But I think I needed to hear it. The way you noticed things. How you acted even when it wasn't obvious. That's what stuck with me." "I think that's the story most people relate to," Megan replied. "The moment they realize waiting for confirmation might cost them more than they're willing to lose." He looked at her, then simply said, "Thanks," and walked out. As she drove home that night, the city lights flashing against her windshield, Megan thought about how many people had said something similar over the last few months, how her decision to speak had echoed into the private spaces of strangers' lives. It didn't feel like heroism. It felt like restoration. Not just of others' confidence, but of her own. At home, she found Liam curled on the couch beside Emily, a large book open in his lap. They were deep in a picture series about ecosystems, deserts, oceans, rainforests. "I'm designing my own planet," he announced without looking up. "It's got 3 moons and only 1 mountain, but the mountain has its own lake. That sounds like a very specific planet, Megan said, dropping her bag by the door. It's protected, he added. There's only one way in. And only people with a password can get through. What's the password? Liam looked up and grinned. Mama. The next morning brought a message from the school, a request to meet with the principal regarding a new mentorship initiative. They were launching a parent-led advisory board, and Megan had been nominated to represent the younger grades. Not because she had the most time. Not because she was the loudest voice. But because, as the principal wrote in her email, you've shown us how deeply a parent can influence the safety and healing of not just one child, but a whole classroom. Megan agreed, though she knew it meant more responsibilities. But something inside her welcomed it, not as a burden, but as the next logical step. Her life no longer revolved around defense. She had turned outward. She wasn't just protecting Liam anymore, she was helping shape the environment he was growing up in. That weekend, Anna invited Megan and Liam to a neighborhood potluck in a nearby park. Max had insisted they come, and Liam, for the first time, didn't hesitate. The air was filled with the smell of grilled vegetables, homemade bread, and laughter that rang across picnic blankets. As Liam and Max built small rock structures near the edge of the playground, Megan sat beside Anna beneath the shade of a large oak. You look lighter, Anna said. Megan smiled. It's strange. I still check the doors 3 times before bed. I still scan parking lots when I walk to my car. But I think the fear's no longer in control. I am. That's everything, Anna replied. They sat in silence for a moment before Megan added, it feels like something broke open this year. Not just in my life, but in how I see the world. And now I don't want to close it again. You shouldn't. After the potluck, Liam asked if Max could come over for the afternoon. Megan agreed, and the boys spent hours transforming blankets into launch pads, closets into cockpits, and empty cardboard boxes into transport shuttles. At one point, Megan overheard Max say, "Where do we go if the ship breaks?" Liam responded without missing a beat, "We don't go anywhere. We fix it. Together." That night, after the house was quiet and Emily had gone home, Megan sat with a cup of tea, reviewing her notebook. She had kept it all this time, even as the pages filled and the cover wore thin. She flipped back through the entries, the early fear, the questions, the warnings she gave herself. But also the breakthroughs. The resilience. The parts where Liam smiled again, trusted again, laughed without watching the door. She turned to the last empty page. And wrote. We came here afraid. We stayed here aware. We are leaving this chapter stronger. She closed the notebook gently and placed it on the shelf beside Liam's drawings. Later, as she stood at the window looking out over the darkened skyline, Megan realized she no longer thought of the apartment as temporary. It wasn't just a stopgap. It had become their haven, their learning ground, their new start. Her phone buzzed quietly. It was a message from Rachel, new parent just joined. Said your name came up 3 times. You're helping more than you know. Megan didn't respond right away. She stood in the stillness, watching the city breathe below. She had no illusions. The world was not suddenly safe. There would always be people who didn't pay attention, who looked away when it mattered most. But there would also be people like her. People who stayed, listened, chose action over denial. And there would be children like Liam, building planets with guarded entries and passwords rooted in love, and in time, learning they could open those doors again. As she turned out the lights and made her way to bed, Megan felt no need to rehearse the next day. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like something she could live.